So we got a $5 super chat by Mustafa is asking, do you believe that additional sanctions against Iran is a good thing? Reza Aslan argues that doing so will cause more drift from Western influence. Uh, that is not accurate. Yeah, more sanctions against the is. I suggest not saying sanctions against Iran. It's sanctions against the Islamic Republic. It's against the government. Okay, and the people of Iran are demanding more sanctions. Like the majority of the people who are in the streets, who are protesting, who are anti against the government, are signaling to all the other countries that this is what they want. Right. So sanctions, of course, has a lot of negative side effects on the people. It's true that it harms the people as well. However, it's choosing between multiple bad options. This is the least bad option, right? Because you don't have that many um, ways to pressure the Islamic government. There's only the way I describe to people why the sanctions against the Islamic Republic make sense is this: there's only three things you could do when there is such wide human rights violations and when there's such a demand from the people within the country for you to do something about it, right? The international community could either, one, do nothing, two, start a war, three, use economic pressure, which would be sanctions. Okay, there is really no other option, right? Doing nothing means that the world just closes its eyes to human rights violations and doesn't respond to anything, right? That's not a good option. Starting a war is also not a very good option. The people in Iran are not asking for that, and the consequences for that is like really bad. Especially in recent history we have seen what that does in Iraq or in Afghanistan. So that's not so it leaves economic pressure, which would be sanctions again. A lot of people would suffer. There are ways to make sanctions more targeted at the government rather than people. It's even when you try as much as you can to make it targeted on the government, people will still suffer. But again, it's good to attempt to make it targeted, like not make it like the sanctions that United States had on Iraq. Those were horrible, inhumane sanctions targeted specifically to hurt the people, which killed around half a million children in Iraq. Sanctions can be done really badly, right? Sanctions that are attempted to make sure to, well, not make sure to try to reduce the harm on the people and focus it on the government. Again, in a country like Iran, that is difficult because of how widespread the influence of the IRGC, which is a military branch of the government, right? Like there's two main military organizations. IRGC is the main one, and it's so influential with the economy that any sanctions you put on the IRGC is going to impact the economy as a whole. But again, you can make it as targeted as you want, as possible. That one thing that Reza Aslan doesn't understand is that we have had experiences with removing sanctions on Iran, right? And we have seen where that money goes, right? Reza Aslan doesn't understand many things. Reza Aslan is somebody who believes that the current government in Iran is as bad as the Shah was, right? So that shows how out of touch with reality this person is, right? Reza Aslan thinks that Iran was in full compliance with the IAEA when Obama was removing sanctions in the JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran, that Iran was in full compliance. And for that, they keep citing that IAEA kept saying that everything looks hunky-dory based on what they're saying. But IAEA report was only based on the areas that they were observing. That is what the report was meant to indicate, that Iran was in compliance with regards to the sites that the IAEA was observing. However, I don't know, even I listened to Reza Aslan even quite recently saying that Iran was in full compliance, even though we have had reports for years now that Iran was enriching uranium off of the sites that IAEA was observing, right? We have and the Iran has no explanations for these detections of all these enrichment uranium. So even during the JCPOA with Obama, Iran was trying to find ways to do enriching of uranium in ways that was not detectable. So we know that they were not in compliance. We have a lot of evidence for that. We even have audio recordings of Fakhrizadeh, who was assassinated by Mossad. Thank you, Mossad. That they were always trying to not get to nuclear energy, but nuclear weapons. That was always their intention, even when they were, even when the sanctions were being removed, right? And we also have information. We also know, we have also analysis that the money that it was flowing in to Iran's economy was being used for terrorist-related activity, for enriching the parts of Iran that is not necessarily the people, but it's for building the government's resources outside of its borders, for supporting Hamas, for supporting Hezbollah, for increasing Iran's influence outside of its borders, for being a menace and causing a lot of headache for all its neighbors. We know all of this, right? So yeah, Reza Aslan is full of crap, and he shouldn't be taken seriously. Anybody who comes and constantly argues that the Islamic Republic of Iran is bad, but it's almost like almost not the same as Shah, the Pahlavi dynasty that came before it. I'm not saying the Pahlavis were completely innocent and had no problem, but they were by far the best, way better than the Islamic Republic, and one of the best regimes that Iran even had, even though they still had their problems. But they managed to make the country leap multiple steps into forward based on what they did. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't have much to add because I think you did a really good job there. But I will just point to the fact that there are definitely videos on this channel and Secular Jihadists where I know you have gone through, where there are various doctors that have lived in Iran for a very long time that are expressing the reason that they can't get the medical necessities has nothing to do with the sanctions. It has to do with the regime. The regime is purposefully doing things that make it harder for them to get those important things. And whether or not the sanctions are there doesn't change that. And I think that's a very good point that, yeah, like a lot of the Iranian people know where the problem is coming from. And it is the Iranian regime. And
the sanctions has an influence, as it has given the regime a cover.
Yes.
To blame it on the sanctions.
Yes.
Right. So there's a lot of things that the regime does for its own benefits, and it's harming the people. And because we have sanctions, it always like, well, it's not us, it's the sanctions. But people can see, no, it's this one is you, right? Like for example, there are drugs that the regime is allowed to bring from outside, and has the money to bring from outside, okay? But they're not bringing from outside so that they could have a monopoly over those medicines within the country so that they could make money off of it.
Yeah.
And people are dying, and the medicine is not good, and the medicine is low in supply, and people are dying because of it. And when people die and there's a lot of problems, the government is like, well, it's not, who you need to blame? The evil West. It's the evil West. They're like, dude, they are begging you to take it.
Yeah.
They're begging you to take it. They're like, there are loopholes within the sanctions right now for food and medicine. And there are countries like lining up to like, hey, here's a medicine, and you're just not taking it. That happened with the Rona situation, right?
Yeah.
The vaccines were being offered to Iran, and the supreme leader came out and says like, we're not going to take your dirty vaccines. YouTube, that's not what I'm saying. We are
very pro.
We are very pro the vaccines, but this is like the supreme leader. The supreme leader came out and issued a semi-fatwa. Well, I mean, it's not official. Like he just said, like, we're not going to do that. And like he himself is somebody who said that I'm not an expert. I appeal to experts. And this man, with not being an expert over vaccines, came out like, wow, we can't trust your vaccines. He says maybe these vaccines are made to specifically target the Iranian genes. Maybe and by banning those vaccines to come here, and again, this is how bad the country is. When he says something, it's above all law. He's not an elected official, but when he says that, then the Congress can't do anything about it. The ministers can't do anything about it. The president can't do anything about it. That will become the thing that everybody has to do just because he said it. And they call themselves a democracy, right? So thousands and thousands of people have died in Iran just because this man thought that these vaccines are foreigners' way to try to, somehow target Iranians, and run experiments on them, right? Yeah. This conspiracy theory. And they're like, oh, we have no medicine here because of sanctions. Bullcrap. It's because of you.
Yeah. Particularly evil and disgusting thing to do, where somebody is outright handing you life-saving medication and you refuse to take it specifically so that you can turn your people against a third party. Yeah. Particularly evil thing, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. It's very, and the guy, Khamenei, right? He's very prone to conspiracy theories, right? He literally thinks, and this is not a metaphor, okay, that Iran's enemies are working with demons, okay? Like he said that on air, on TV, on Iran's national TV. And by demons, he doesn't mean like symbolic demons, like walking, talking demons. That America is like, they have like, he imagines like the United States presidents sitting down on a table, and the other side there's a demon, and they are like colluding together against Iran. Yeah.
I don't know what to. Why do you guys even talk about this stuff? What's the point? I don't know, because the leader of a country as a dictator is telling people that demons are a real thing. Like, I don't know why we talk about it.
You can now get the sexiest blasphemous art ever known to mankind for free. Too sexy to show most of it here on YouTube. We draw Muhammad, Hindu goddesses, sexy hijabi art, Jesus, Mother Mary, Japanese god, Greek gods, and much, much more. Click on the link below where it says get our free blasphemous art.